stillness blanketed the farm as night fell. The soft glow of the moon cast silver shadows over the fields, creating an almost magical ambience. Everything seemed peaceful until the sharp crunch of gravel shattered the calm. Three figures crept towards the lone farmhouse, their silhouettes blending into the darkness like ghosts. They were hushed, desperate for silence, and driven by the insatiable hunger of greed. Inside the house, Farmer James sat at his worn kitchen table, absent-mindedly tossing his last poker hand. The wise old man had seen more than his share of sleepless nights under this roof. He'd weathered storms, droughts, and the passing years with grit that ran deep in his veins. But today, unease lingered in the air, as tangible as the aroma of fresh coffee that filled the room. Through the years, the farm had become a second skin for him, with its creaks and groans echoing stories only he could hear. As the intruders approached, shadows danced on the walls outside. Their intentions were clear. They were no ordinary thieves. These men knew the farm's secrets. James had seen traces of their kind before: the missing tools, the broken locks. But tonight would be different. Outside, the men murmured together, their faces twisted in excitement and malice. They wanted the old man's cash, his tools, anything that could be quickly grabbed and turned into cold cash. Their plan seemed foolproof. Nobody was supposed to be awake at this hour, let alone a sharp-eyed farmer like James. But the farmer had a trick up his sleeve. With the moon peeking through the windows, illuminating the chaos of the kitchen in soft silver, James stood up and walked to the back door, the sound of his old boots echoing softly. He reached for the lantern hanging on the wall, swinging it down to light his way. The door creaked when he turned the handle, a sound so common, yet it carried the weight of anticipation that rippled through the darkness outside. As he stepped out into the night, the cool air hit him like a wave, calming but alerting. The stars twinkled overhead, but his eyes were on the patch of grass where he'd often planted seeds. What most wouldn't notice, he saw clearly. Small disturbances in the ground, the path of intruders. A low growl escaped his throat as he recognized the silent treatises of battle. Inside the minds of the intruders, thoughts raced. "This is easy," one whispered, his eyebrows knitted in determination. But doubt seeped in, crawling through their confidence. What if someone sees us? The thrill of adventure faded with every passing heartbeat. As James moved stealthily toward the barn, every step layered with purpose, he summoned memories of his late wife. She used to tell him that when push came to shove, the heart of a farmer beats fiercely. Tonight, that heartbeat reverberated, urging him forward into the abyss of shadow, driven by a primal urge to protect what was rightfully his. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed in the distance, metal meeting metal. The robbers had stumbled into the barn, setting off a cacophony of distress. The mind of a thief is often clouded. They couldn't help themselves. They had only a fleeting moment before the old barn door creaked open wider, spilling light around them. Hissed one of the intruders. What was that? Before they could retreat, a voice rang out, a deep, steady voice that shook their core. The men froze, hearts racing, adrenaline surging. James stepped forward, the lantern casting his seasoned face in sharp contrast to the darkness. Rage, fear, and confusion mixed in a potent cocktail. They hadn't expected him to be awake, and now he stood before them, undaunted, unafraid. "What the hell, old man?" One of them barked, attempting to sound tough despite the quake in his words. But James stood tall. "This is my farm." With slow precision, he raised the lantern higher, illuminating his weathered hands, callous but steady. "You have two choices. You can leave now, or you can face the consequences of your actions." The robbers exchanged glances, doubt creeping in. Fear is a strange companion. It makes the heart race but also sharpens the mind. James knew that, and he capitalized on their hesitation. He wasn't just going to stand there. He was going to fight back with all he had. "Think about what you're doing," he pressed on, his voice echoing with the weight of experience. "The risk isn't worth it." With words sharp as any knife, he drove a wedge between them. The men, now caught in their own web of uncertainty, started to back away, doubt swirling within them like a tempest. Then a howl pierced the night, a reminder of what lay beyond the land they sought to conquer. The wind caught its breath, rustling the leaves, carrying the distant sounds of the wild. James took a step forward, filling the space with presence, the lantern flickering as if in agreement. Don't be fools. You think the world is yours for the taking. Take a good look around. As the words settled into silence, the men shifted, realizing they were not up against any ordinary farmer. This was a man shaped by the storms of life, drenched in losses, yet brimming with resilience. They hadn't anticipated a confrontation of this sort. They may have come seeking riches, but they were face to face with the soul of the land. "Let's get out of here," one said, the bravado fading, eyes darting back to the looming darkness. But before they could flee, James snorted, "You thought you could just walk into my life and take what's mine." With a sudden move, he threw the lantern to the ground, shattering it. The glass exploded into 1,000 glittering shards like stars falling from the sky. Flames erupted, casting a fiery glow around them. The warmth of the fire kissed the chill of night, igniting an uncontainable blaze. The robbers yelped, caught off guard by the abrupt whirlwind of chaos. They stumbled back, the flickering light revealing their terrified faces, bathed in shadows and fear. The darkness that had once been their ally now turned against them, illuminating their cowardice. Without hesitation, James lunged, seizing the opportunity. He shouted, the force of his command echoing through the shimmering night. The men, now completely rattled, spun around, fleeing blindly into the hedge and shadows. James, heart pounding with the thrill of survival, stood tall, chest heaving, watching them disappear into the night. The farm belonged to him, birthed from hard work, guided by determination and fortified by love. As calm settled once more, the flames flickered, dancing a hypnotic waltz, illuminating the landscape. James reflected on the ordeal. He felt the adrenaline fade, replaced by a quiet surge of pride. He defended more than just his property. He'd stood firm against shadows of greed and fear, reclaiming his strength. The night had tested him, but like the plants in his fields, he'd grown through adversity. As he looked around at the whispering winds, he could almost hear the voice of his late wife, cheering him on from beyond, her laughter intertwining with the night's melody. In that moment, he realized the greatest treasures weren't material. They were the memories forged, the land nurtured, and the spirit indomitable. As dawn kissed the horizon, painting it with gold and soft pink hues, a new day began. The world outside was awakening, and Farmer James, ruler of his patch of earth, prepared to face whatever came next. He'd proven to himself that fear means nothing when you're willing to stand up and fight for what you believe in. Tonight, the robbers had learned a powerful lesson, one etched in the depths of their memories. They would think twice before trespassing again, and perhaps they'd left with a flicker of wisdom. Sometimes, the heart of an old farmer beats louder than the clang of greed. As the sun climbed higher, the farm breathed anew, a testament to resilience and spirit, a quiet promise that no one could snatch away what was rightfully his. With the echoes of the night still lingering, Farmer James set about his day, stepping into the light of a world that sparkled with possibilities, reminding anyone watching that courage often rises when darkness falls. The moon hung low in the sky, shedding pale light over the vast expanse of quiet farmland. Shadows danced in the corners of the fields, weaving in and out of the rustling corn stalks. Here, in this secluded pocket of the world, a sense of calm reigned, but beneath that surface, tension brewed. Outside, just beyond the reach of the light, 3 figures crept closer, eyes gleaming with greed. They were robbers, 2 men and a woman embarking on what they thought was an easy score. Disguised by the cloak of night, they weren't here for much. Just a few tools, cash, anything that could be turned into quick cash. Tonight, they believed, would be easy. The old farmer who owned this land wouldn't stand a chance. But they didn't know Farmer Dan. They didn't know that for years, he had been building this life with every ounce of sweat and determination. He had planted each seed by hand, nurtured each crop with love, and fought through droughts and storms that would have broken lesser men. Tonight, like every night, his heart pulsed with the rhythm of the land, vigilant and alive. Inside the small farmhouse, the air was filled with the comforting scent of fresh-baked bread. Dan wiped flour off his hands and turned to the kitchen window, glancing out at the moonlit fields. He felt that familiar itch at the back of his mind. Something was off. Years of farming had sharpened his instincts. The sound of the silence was too heavy, too tense, and in the depths of his soul he sensed danger creeping ever closer. Outside, the robbers moved in, each step calculated, fearless. "Let's grab what we can and get out fast," whispered Jake, the brawniest of the group, a determined glint in his eyes. But as soon as the words left his mouth, a sudden rustling from the nearby barn made them halt. Sarah, the woman in the group, hissed, her breath catching in her throat. She squinted into the shadows. "Just the wind," Jake dismissed, but his bravado was waning. They had not taken into account that old Dan wasn't just any farmer. He was a man who knew his land better than anyone else. Beneath layers of age and toil, a fierce spirit lurked. As the intruders slowly approached the front porch, Dan stood at the back door, heart racing yet resolute. With a sudden movement, he decided to arm himself, not with a weapon, but with what lay closest to his heart. With purpose, he opened the kitchen drawer and took out his trusty old farming tool, a pitchfork, still sharp and ready. This wasn't just a tool for crops, it was a symbol of his resolve. The robbers creaked the porch steps under their weight, and Jake reached for the doorknob, thinking of the treasures inside. Unbeknownst to them, Dan had a plan. A small yet powerful wave of courage surged through him, illuminating the darkness within. It was time to show them how fear could transform into strength. With breath held and muscles tense, Dan took a position just inside the door, hidden by the shadows. As Jake turned the knob and the door creaked open, an eerie silence cloaked the scene. The moment hung in the air, a tightrope of uncertainty. Then, like a flash of lightning, Dan burst through the door. He roared, his voice solid and unwavering. The lantern light from within silhouetted his figure, a vengeful guardian of the farm. The robbers were taken aback, stunned by the sudden appearance of the farmer. Jake fumbled for words, his bravado faltering. Dan interrupted, stepping forward, pitchfork gripped tightly in his hands. "You thought this was going to be easy." Sarah's eyes darted around, looking for an escape. "We don't want any trouble, just." But Dan wasn't going to let them off so easily. For years, he had fought battles much tougher than this. This wasn't just about tools or cash, it was about standing his ground. It was about reminding these intruders that this was his home, his legacy. His voice dropped lower, charged with the strength of every challenge he had overcome. "You want to leave?" Jake, still clenching his jaw, tried to regain control, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his bravado. "Then you should be," Dan replied, advancing a step. The tension thickened, the atmosphere crackling like the calm before a storm. Sarah exchanged a frantic glance with Jake, both of them aware that fear was creeping in, pushing back against their bravado. Dan took another deliberate step forward, the pitchfork glinting ominously in the light. "You want to know what happens when you tread on another man's ground?" Just as he spoke, a distant howl broke the quiet, echoing through the night. The sound resonated, reverberating with history, an anthem of the wild mixed with the weight of the land. It sent shivers down their spines, urging them to consider the power that lay hidden within the farmer's resolve. In that moment, the tables began to turn. The robbers, once confident, now stood frozen. They realized Dan wasn't just some old man. He was a protector of his land, fierce and unwavering, a mountain in the face of their storm. Sarah finally stammered, desperation clawing at her resolve. But Jake couldn't bring himself to move. Within moments, the remaining bravado in him shattered, replaced by an instinct for survival. "The door's right here," Dan pressed, the pitchfork pointing towards their exit. "You're free to leave, but if you take another step toward this place." With hearts pounding in their chests, the robbers turned to flee, scrambling down the porch steps. The crunch of gravel underfoot echoed like the heartbeat of their own regret as they dashed toward the darkened fields. The fear wrapped around them like a cloak, forcing them to reconsider their reckless ambitions. As they sprinted away, Dan didn't let down his guard. He remained at the door, watching them disappear into the darkness, pitchfork still held high like a shield against further threats. The silence returned, but it was different now, as if the night itself sighed in relief. Inside the farmhouse, the remnants of what could have been lingered in the air. The reality of danger had felt so close they could taste it, yet Farmer Dan stood firm. He reflected on the fight he had just faced, afraid yet triumphant. Each word carried the weight of defiance born from countless battles, the storms that threatened crops, the droughts that drained lives, and now cold-hearted thieves. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows. the warm glow washing away the remnants of fear from the night before. Dan stepped outside, the morning dew crisp beneath his boots. The world felt different, the air shimmered with renewed energy, and the sky, painted in soft pastels, echoed hope. A flock of birds took flight, scattering into the open sky, a reminder of freedom. With every morning there was a promise, and today was no different. There would be work to do, a crop to plant, fields to tend to, and animals to care for. Peace could return to the land, and Farmer Dan would ensure that no shadow could take that away. He walked to the edge of his field, running his hands over the soil, feeling the pulse of life beneath. That night he'd faced down intruders, but today was dedicated to nurturing his home, the very ground where memories blossomed like wildflowers. In the coming days, whispers of the night's peril slipped through the small town, tales of an old farmer standing his ground lingering on the lips of those who heard them. The robbers wouldn't return, and perhaps the stories would serve as a warning to others, how the heart of a farmer beats with unyielding courage, ready to rise against whatever challenges the night might bring. Dan smiled softly to himself, the warmth of pride resting comfortably in his chest. He had not just surprised robbers that night, he had also reminded himself of the strength he carried within. Each sunrise was another opportunity. Each seed he planted was a testament to resilience and hope. With the farm alive and thriving, Dan turned towards the horizon, daydreaming of possibilities. There was work to do, and he was ready to meet it head-on. The night had tested him, but as dawn broke anew, he knew he would face whatever came next with resolve, and no thief would ever snatch away the spirit that danced in his heart. The moon hung low, a silvery sentinel watching over the fields as a cool breeze swept through the quiet farm. It was the kind of night that wrapped around you like a comforting blanket, serene and undisturbed. But in the stillness, darkness stirred. A rustling sound shattered the calm, followed by hushed whispers that pierced the tranquility like a knife. 3 figures crept across the gravel pathway leading to the farmhouse. They were thieves, 2 men and a woman shrouded in black, hearts pumping with the thrill of mischief. They had come here with one mission: to grab anything of value, to leave with pockets heavy and spirits high. The old farmer, they thought, would be asleep, oblivious to their intentions. This would be an easy score. But what they didn't know was that Farmer Tom had never fully surrendered to sleep, especially not on nights like these. He had spent years cultivating his land, every inch of it a testament to hard work and perseverance. The fields felt like an extension of him, and as the wind whispered through the cornfields, he sensed something wasn't quite right. Inside the farmhouse, Tom sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee as he glanced out the window. Shadows danced along the ground, but one shadow moved differently, too stealthily, too cautiously. His instincts flared. This was his home, and he wouldn't let anyone take that from him. With a calm resolve, he set down his mug, the ceramic clinking softly against the weathered wood. Just beyond the door, the thieves whispered, exchanging nervous glances. One of them whispered, his voice tinged with doubt, "Of course. There's no way an old man like that is awake at this hour." Jake, the cockiest of the trio, replied, shoving his hands deeper into his pockets. He was tall and muscular, with an air of confidence that masked an undercurrent of fear. As they approached the door, Tom grabbed a pitchfork from the wall, a long, sturdy tool, the kind any farmer would keep close. This wasn't just about defense, it was a symbol of everything he had built. He knew that it wasn't just his tools they were after, it was his dignity, his hard-earned peace. He wouldn't allow that. "We'll be in and out," Jake asserted, twisting the doorknob. He pushed the door open, creaking the hinges like a whisper of betrayal. The darkness spilled into the house, and they stepped inside, unaware that danger lurked just beyond the threshold. Suddenly, a voice thundered through the shadows, hitting them like a bolt of lightning. They froze, breath caught in their throats, eyes wide. Tom stood at the end of the hallway, the lantern flickering behind him, casting an imposing shadow. The pitchfork gripped firmly in his calloused hands glinted in the light. The intruders were too shocked to move. The image of the feeble old farmer they had envisioned evaporated into thin air. "How?" Sarah stuttered, instinctively stepping back. "Farmers know their land," Tom replied, voice laden with the weight of years. Jake gathered himself, stepping forward with bravado that now felt like a cheap mask. "We aren't scared of you, old man." But Tom stepped forward, and with that, everything shifted. "You've got it all wrong," he said, his voice steady but fierce. "This is my home, and you've got no right to be here. I built this place from the ground up, piece by piece." The robbers glanced at each other, uncertainty flickering in their eyes, fear, a primal feeling, wrapped around them, tightening its grip. They had encountered unexpected resistance, and that was unsettling. Jake tried again, his confidence cracking, but Tom wasn't going to back down. "No," he said firmly. The tension thickened like fog rolling in, suffocating the air. Tom held his ground, the pitchfork poised, reflecting the light like a striking sword. With those words, he drew on the strength of generations before him, the resilience of every farmer whose hands had worked the soil, the spirit of all who had stood against adversity. He had always been a man of peace, a believer in hard work, but tonight was different. As Sarah backed away, Jake shuffled his feet, his bravado evaporating. "Let's just go," he said, voice trembling. The moment hung heavy in the air, charged with adrenaline. The robbers stood paralyzed, confusion and fear wrestling in their minds. Tom took a step forward, lowering the pitchfork slightly but still keeping it ready. In that moment, the wind howled outside, joining the tension with its fierce melody. It seemed the earth itself was urging them to reconsider, to turn back. For a fleeting second, Jake's tough mask cracked, revealing a glimpse of vulnerability. "We didn't mean to cause any harm," he blurted, the false bravado fading. Tom replied, stepping even closer. "You think that's all there is to it?" Fear cascaded in waves through the robbers. The resolve they had felt moments before began to crumble as Tom's steady gaze bore into them. It was a stare fueled by years of toil under the sun, the pain of loss and the joy of triumph. They were no more than shadows in his realm. They would not claim what he had built. Finally, Sarah turned to the others, her eyes desperate. "Let's go." There was a tremor in her voice, shaking away the remnants of bravado. Without waiting for a response, she dashed toward the door, Jake and the third robber following in confusion. The shock of their encounter propelled them into action, leaving behind a weight of dread and regret. They rushed out into the night, their footsteps pounding on the gravel as they fled the scene, hearts racing. Tom stood at the doorway, watching them disappear into the darkness, his chest heaving with a mixture of adrenaline and triumph. He had faced down fear and protected everything he held dear. The adrenaline coursed through him like wildfire, igniting a sense of empowerment that had long lain dormant. With the robbers gone, a steady calm returned to the farm, settling over the fields like a gentle blanket. The night once again embraced the landscape, and as he turned back inside, relief flooded through him. But there, in the quiet aftermath of the chaos, Jack's voice echoed in his mind. This was more than just a confrontation. It was a reminder that sometimes, standing up against fear is the bravest thing one can do. The moonlight lit up the kitchen as he walked to the table. The remnants of his coffee sat untouched, the steam now dissipated. But he found that the warmth of victory filled the space. Tom realized in that moment that he had stood firm against not just the intrusion of three robbers, but against a society that often overlooked the common man, the farmer, the worker, the dreamer. As dawn broke on the horizon, golden rays spilled across the fields, lighting the way forward. Life would continue, crops would grow, and his heart would remain strong. Over the years, he had weathered storms both literal and metaphorical, and this was just another testament to his unwavering spirit. He walked outside, greeting the new day with open arms. The earth beneath his feet felt alive, pulsing with abundance. The corn swayed gently in the breeze, each stalk a silent witness to the strength within the rhythms of life. In the days that followed, whispers of the encounter spread through the small surrounding town, tales of an old farmer who surprised intruders with courage and resolve. Others began to share their stories, opening up about their own experiences, proving that bravery resides within us all, waiting for the right moment to unfold. And though the robbers would not return, they had inadvertently taught Tom another important lesson: the power of standing tall against injustice, of protecting what is rightfully yours. With every sunrise that followed, He reveled in the certainty that fear could be faced and overcome, transforming a moment of darkness into a story of light. From that day on, the farm flourished, vibrant and alive. And as days turned into seasons, Farmer Tom continued to tend to his land, knowing that every challenge met with courage only made the roots of his legacy grow deeper. In the end, it wasn't the tools or the crops that defined him. It was the spirit that lived within. And he would carry that spirit, fierce and unyielding, for as long as the sun rose and set over his beloved farm, armed not just with tools, but with the kind of grit that comes from decades of hardship. He was the heart of the land, and he would never let anyone forget it. A typical night on the farm took a sharp turn when the sound of crunching gravel broke the stillness. The moon hung bright in the sky, casting eerie shadows over the fields. 3 figures moved stealthily down the path, hearts racing with anticipation. They were robbers, 2 men and a woman stealthily inching closer to the farmhouse, their eyes glinting with greed. Tonight, they believed, would be an easy score. Inside, Farmer Bill sat at the old kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand, lost in thought. The gentle creak of the wood framed the night's tranquility. Over the years, Bill had built this farm into a home, a sanctuary where he poured his sweat, blood, and dreams. But tonight, he sensed an unnatural stillness. Something was off. Eyes narrowed, Bill stood up, placing his mug down. He'd seen signs before: broken fences, scattered tools. He knew every corner of his land like the back of his hand, and right now, a nagging instinct told him to investigate. With a deep breath, he inched toward the window, pulling back the curtain slightly. And there they were, shadows flitting amongst the shadows. The robbers were too focused on their plans to notice the old farmer watching. They whispered among themselves, calculating their next move. "In and out," one murmured, glancing at the others. It seemed foolproof. They had all underestimated the farmer, believing he would be an easy target. Bill felt a surge of protective instinct rush through him. This was not just a few tools or cash. They were threatening his way of life, the very essence of who he was. He had weathered storms worse than this, and he wouldn't let 3 thieves take his hard-earned peace. Stepping back into the darkened kitchen, he reached for his trusty pitchfork, the very symbol of his labor and grit. In his hands, it felt like an extension of his own will. Meanwhile, just outside the door, the robbers were preparing to make their entry. Jake, the biggest of the trio, turned to Sarah and Mike, his companions. "Let's make this quick." He twisted the doorknob, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silence. With a swift push, the door swung open, creaking on its old hinges. They stepped inside, the dim light pooling around them. "Stay sharp," Jake said, glancing around cautiously. But the moment was short-lived. Before they could react, Bill emerged from the shadows like a guardian spirit, pitchfork raised. He bellowed, his voice like thunder reverberating off the walls. The robbers froze, the surprise hitting them harder than any blow. They hadn't prepared for the confrontation, and the sight of the old farmer made their hearts race faster than the fear that had chased them into the darkness. Jake stumbled back, the bravado evaporating as he tried to regain control of the situation. Just looking for some tools," Jake stammered, his voice faltering. Bill's voice was low, laced with a righteous fury. When he stepped into the light, the farmer's figure transformed from a frail old man into a monument of resilience. The pitchfork gleamed ominously in his hand. For years, Bill had battled droughts, storms, and pests, and now he faced 3 intruders on his land. He felt the weight of generations behind him, and his heart quickened with the courage of a man who had fought for everything he had. Sarah, shaken by the farmer's sudden assertion of authority, glanced at the others, her eyes wide. "This isn't worth it, we should go," she urged, but Jake was already trapped in his own pride. He couldn't back down now. "You're just an old man," he sneered, trying to rally their dwindling courage. Bill stepped forward, raising the pitchfork. "Try me. You have no idea what I've faced in my life." The tension in the room thickened, sparking an invisible line drawn in the sand. Bill stood firm, unyielding in his resolve, while the robbers exchanged nervous glances, now questioning their decisions. Fear crept into their hearts, a cold chill weighing down their bravado. "Let's just grab what we can and go," Mike finally said, desperation edging his voice. But Jake only tightened his grip, unwilling to cower. "No, we can take him. With a swift movement, Bill pivoted, readying his pitchfork. "You think you can overpower me? You have no idea how hard I've fought for this land." The moment surged with tension, the kind that tingled in the air like electricity. There they stood, the robbers flush with desperation and the farmer his back straight and defiant. The knight felt restless. In an instant, without warning, Bill lunged forward, pitchfork aimed at the ground as if challenging the earth itself. The robbers stumbled, caught off guard. He shouted, voice rising to a fever pitch. In a moment of chaos, Sarah screamed, turning to flee. The other two joined her, scrambling blindly. They dashed past Bill, barreling out of the farmhouse and into the night, fear propelling them like a tide. As they reached the gravel path, hearts pounding, the reality of their choices washed over them. "We bit off more than we could chew," Jake gasped, breathless. Back inside, Bill stood in the aftermath of the encounter, adrenaline surging through him, a mixture of relief and disbelief swelling in his chest. He had stood his ground, surprising the intruders, shattering their confidence like glass. The chaos outside quieted, leaving only the sound of crickets chirping in the distance. Bill took a moment to collect himself, the pitchfork still gripped tightly in his hands. A smile crept onto his face. He had defended his home, but more importantly, he had proven something to himself. Fear could paralyze, but standing your ground could liberate. The night spent alone, contemplating the farm's future, all led to this moment. With the robbers scrambling into the night's embrace, Bill stepped outside to breathe in the cool air. The stars glimmered overhead, the moon casting soft shadows on the land he had nurtured for decades. His heart swelled with a mixture of pride and gratitude, knowing he had faced down adversity. In the days that followed, the local town buzzed with stories of the night's events. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Did you hear about Farmer Bill?" People shook their heads in disbelief, marveling at his bravery. Even the townsfolk who had often overlooked him began to see Bill in a new light, a man forged by the earth, unyielding in the face of danger. Each morning felt different as Bill walked through his fields. He greeted the sun with renewed fervor, appreciating the life that pulsed around him. The crops stood tall, swaying gently in the breeze, like sentinels of his strength. It was a reminder that resilience could grow from even the most chaotic encounters. The following week, children from the town approached Farmer Bill, curious about his encounter. They gathered just beyond the fence, wide-eyed with admiration. A young girl asked, her voice filled with wonder. Bill smiled, kneeling down to meet their gaze. Sometimes, courage comes in all shapes and sizes. The children listened intently as he recounted the story, not just as a tale of conflict, but one of strength and protection. They absorbed his words like sun-soaked soil, understanding that bravery often blossoms in the most unexpected places. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Farmer Bill sat on the porch, pitchfork resting beside him. He could still feel the thrill of that night, the pulse of his heart, the fear and triumph woven together in a tapestry of resilience. While the world could often feel chaotic, he understood that the heart of a farmer beat steadfastly, holding on to the land, the stories, and the legacy built through years of toil. Even in moments of fear, strength can shine through, illuminating the dark corners of life. Bill knew that the farm would always welcome both challenges and triumphs as long as he stood vigilant. On that peaceful evening, with the stars twinkling overhead, Farmer Bill took a deep breath and smiled. No thief, no storm would ever shake the foundations of what he loved. The farm was alive, and so was he ready to face whatever lay ahead. And somewhere in the depths of that night, as shadows danced across the fields, a newfound strength took root, blossoming into hope for what tomorrow might bring. A soft wind brushed over the fields as the moon hung high, casting ghostly shadows on the ground. The night seemed deceptively calm, but for Farmer Hank, a stout man with calloused hands and a heart full of grit, an unsettling stillness gnawed at him. Something was off. Years of farming had taught him to trust his instincts, and tonight that instinct screamed danger. Just a few yards away, hidden in the darkness, 3 figures crouched low, 2 men and a woman. They whispered amongst themselves, their eyes gleaming in the night, restless with ambition and greed. "We'll be in and out," whispered Jake, the leader of the group, his hands trembling slightly with excitement. He was tall with a swagger that masked nerves. They thought Hank was just an easy target, an old farmer, perhaps too tired to stand his ground. What they didn't know was the depths of Hank's resolve. He had weathered countless storms, both in nature and life, and he wasn't about to let anyone take what belonged to him. Inside the farmhouse, the old wooden walls creaked softly, as if whispering their own secrets. Hank moved quietly through his home, the only light coming from a flickering candle. He could hear the faintest rustle outside, prompting him to reach for his old baseball bat, a trusty weapon bestowed upon him by his late father. It carried with it memories, love, and now it felt like a lifeline. As his heart raced, he glanced out the window and saw shadows moving against the backdrop of his fields. Adrenaline surged through Hank and he clenched the bat, breathing deeply to calm his racing heart. "Not on my watch," he muttered, steeling his spine. Outside, the robbers moved closer, their excitement palpable. "Let's get this done," Sarah urged, her voice a mix of anxiety and determination. "I don't like this place at all." "All farms feel wrong at night," Jake scoffed. He pushed through the front door, swinging it open with a creak that echoed ominously in the silent air. As they stepped inside, the warm glow of the candlelight spilled into the entryway, illuminating the seemingly abandoned space. Jake's bravado faltered, and for just a moment, doubt flickered in his eyes. But the allure of the score blinded him to what lay ahead. At that very moment, Hank lunged forward from the shadows, wielding the bat like an extension of himself. He bellowed, his voice carrying the weight of years spent defending his land. The figure that stood before him was no longer an old farmer, but a man fueled by the desire to protect everything he held dear. The robbers froze. Fear clenched their hearts as they stood paralyzed, taken off guard by the glowing figure before them. "We just, thought we could borrow some tools," Jake stammered, his bravado crumbling. Hank's voice dropped into a low growl, the kind that sent chills down their spines. The tension crackled in the air, thick enough to cut. They hadn't come prepared for confrontation, and there in the flickering candlelight, Hank stood tall, unwavering, a bastion against their dismal intentions. He hadn't fought through years of droughts and hard winters to let the likes of them take what was his. With every surge of courage, Hank stepped forward, the bat resting lightly on his shoulder but utterly intimidating. "You're trespassing," he said, voice steady. Jake looked to Sarah, his eyes wide with uncertainty. "We can't just leave," he mumbled, desperation leaking into his tone. Hank interrupted, his voice sharp and commanding. In that moment, time suspended. The tension hung thick, filling the air with an almost electric charge. The robbers stood frozen, a mix of fear and disbelief washing over them. The old farmer they had dismissed was a force to be reckoned with, full of unyielding spirit. Quickly, Sarah broke the silence. She reached out a hand, her voice trembling as if trying to soothe the man before them. But Hank wasn't swayed by her words. He had written his own story through every blade of grass, every inch of this land. "This isn't just a farmhouse, it's a part of me," he said, his voice echoing wisdom and urgency. Fear gripped Jake's heart even tighter now. "We didn't mean to," he began, but as he spoke, Hank made his move. With a flourish born of both necessity and raw courage, Hank swung the bat. It wasn't a wild strike, but a deliberate display of power. The sound resonated through the night, and the robbers scrambled back to the door, panic turning their feet to lead. They were no longer the confident thieves who had crept in just moments before. They were simply scared individuals desperate for escape. Jake shouted, his composure completely shattered now. They bolted, crashing through the doorway and into the night, fear propelling them into the darkness. As Hank stood there in the aftermath, his heart raced, the adrenaline of battle coursing through him. He had defended his home, his sanctuary, and for all their bravado, the thieves had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes it's not just the objects you take that define a man, it's the spirit he embodies in the face of adversity. With the robbers gone, a calm settled over the farmhouse. Hank turned down the candle, soaking in the quiet tranquility that washed over him. He wiped the sweat from his brow and took a deep breath, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. The moonlight poured through the window, dappling the floor with silver, and he stepped outside, taking in the calm beauty of his land. The field stretched before him, a testament to hard work and resilience, a continuous cycle of life and renewal. But tonight held more than just survival. It encapsulated a lesson that echoed through generations. As he stood there, he felt a sense of renewal, grounded in the victory of protecting what truly mattered. This was more than just a plot of land. It was a legacy built on sacrifice and love. The next morning brought a new light. As the sun rose, painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange and pink, Hank felt invigorated, ready to face the day anew. He walked through his fields, watching the crops sway gently in the breeze, each stalk a reminder of what he had accomplished. But Hank also knew the town would whisper about what had happened. News travels fast in a close-knit community, and the story of the old farmer standing his ground would soon ripple through both admiration and disbelief. By mid-morning, kids from the nearby town poked their heads into the fields, eyes wide with curiosity. A young boy named Sam asked, barely able to contain himself. Hank chuckled softly, wiping his brow and leaning on his pitchfork, the tool now a symbol of strength rather than confrontation. "You could say I surprised them," he replied, eyes twinkling with the wisdom of experience. A girl named Lily pressed, her curiosity piqued. With a smile, Hank recalled the event, recounting his poise and the fierceness of his spirit while omitting the fear that had clawed at him moments earlier. The children's eyes grew wide as they listened, absorbing his every word. In that moment, Hank wasn't just a farmer. He became a mentor, a protector of not only the land but of shared stories that echoed through generations. As days turned to weeks, the incident faded into a distant memory, but its impact remained. Farmer Hank carried himself with a new air of confidence, his posture straighter, his step more sure. Word had spread of his bravery, and people began to look at him with newfound respect. Neighbors began to drop by more often, sharing cups of coffee and stories, rekindling a sense of community that had once felt strained. It was as if the robbers had inadvertently sparked a resurgence of camaraderie among those in the village. As autumn approached, the fields were ripe with crops, glowing golden in the fading light. Hank tended to his harvest with care, each bushel a testament to his resilience. The laughter of children echoed across the land down to the fields, intertwining with the whispers of rustling leaves. And just when he thought life had returned to normal, the unexpected happened. One night, under the glow of the full moon, Hank decided to host a gathering, a celebration of the harvest and a chance for the community to come together in gratitude. Neighbors arrived with plates of food, laughter bubbling up around the bonfire as families shared stories, old and new. Hank stood proudly but humbly, knowing that this moment, the warmth of friendship, was what truly made a community thrive. As the night went on, stories of strength and courage were shared, none more poignant than Hank's encounter with the robbers. He told it with the spirit of a man grateful for what he had, inspiring all who listened. Sometimes it's not just about what you own. It's about protecting the spirit within those walls and nurturing what you love, he concluded, raising his glass in a toast. At that moment, the barn came alive with clinking glasses, laughter ringing out into the night, echoing through the fields that held their hopes and dreams. The community grew richer with each shared moment, the bonds stronger than ever, rooted deeply in struggles and triumphs alike. In the days, months, and years that lay ahead, Farmer Hank continued to work the land with unwavering passion. And though he would face many challenges to come, the night of the robbery solidified something monumental within him. He discovered not just the strength to defend his home, but the power of unity and community that would always rise stronger than any threat. His heart pulsed with gratitude for both the land and the people he cherished. The spirit of a farmer lives on, guided by the principles of hard work and resilience, forever ready to face whatever storms life might bring. And as long as Hank stood on this land, he would remain unyielding, protector of his home and champion of unwavering hope. The moon hung like a watchful eye in the night sky, casting eerie shadows over the sprawling rice fields. The air was thick with the scent of earth and the promise of rain. Farmer Mike had been watching the clouds gather for hours, but it was not the impending storm that kept him on edge. No, it was the unmistakable crunch of gravel underfoot that pulled him from his thoughts, the unmistakable sound of footsteps creeping closer. Around the bend, three figures moved with a quiet urgency: two men and a woman, their faces masked by darkness and intent on mischief. They believed that silence was their ally, yet the tension hung thick in the air, a taut rope ready to snap. "This is going to be easy," one of the men whispered, barely suppressing a confident smirk. Inside the farmhouse, Mike's instincts buzzed with unease. Years of toil had taught him to be attuned to every sound, every shift in the rhythm of his land. Leaning against the kitchen counter, he wiped dirt-streaked hands onto his apron, the faint glow of a lantern illuminating the room. He glanced out the window just as a shadow danced across the driveway. Something in him awakened, a deep-seated need to protect what he had built, to defend his home. He moved quietly through the house, the wooden floorboards creaking softly beneath his weight. Hand reaching for the handle of a baseball bat leaning next to the door, he felt an infectious pulse fear but also courage. The intruders had no idea what they were about to face. The trio had reached the porch now, whispering and giggling nervously, their bravado threatening to falter. "If we get caught, it's your fault," one of the men muttered, glancing around wildly. "Stop whining," Sarah shot back, her tone a mix of irritation and disbelief. "Just remember the plan." Two of them converged on the door while the third nervously scanned the surroundings. As they pushed the door open, a harsh creak echoed, shattering the stillness. They stepped over the threshold, consumed by anticipation, entirely unaware that Mike was waiting just inside the shadows. With raw instinct, he swung the door wide open, and there he stood, an imposing figure clutching a bat, eyes alight with ferocity. He roared, anger bursting forth like a dam breaking. The trespassers froze. Time seemed to slow, the air thick with disbelief. Fear washed over them, rendering their bravado useless. They stood face to face with a man who had fought every day for this very land. One of the men stammered, suddenly faltering under the weight of his own lies. Mike retorted, his voice a steady bell tolling judgment. As he took a step forward, the bat seemed to grow heavier in their eyes, a symbol of his unwavering determination. He wasn't just defending a piece of land. He was battling for his dignity, his years of effort poured into every crop, every season. Mike had faced storms, droughts, and despair. He would not back down from three intruders. One of the men, Jake, unprepared for confrontation, glanced nervously at Sarah. He whispered, uncertainty coiling around his heart. Sarah hissed back, but her voice wavered, doubt creeping in. "Leave," Mike commanded, his voice like gravel. In that moment, the atmosphere surged with tension. Every heartbeat felt heavy, every breath was a shared fear. The robbers exchanged frantic glances, each one trying to gauge the other's resolve. Inside, panic twisted, but Mike emerged as a rock, a pillar. Then, unexpectedly, Jake lunged forward, frighteningly impulsive. Instead of grabbing a tool, he reached for Mike, his fingers clamping down on the bat. Adrenaline surged, and in that split second, everything hung in balance: years of hard work against the reckless ambition of a desperate intruder. Without hesitation, Mike pivoted, using all his strength, and swung the bat just in time. The metal struck the ground as Jake stumbled back, shocked and enraged. He spat, scrambling to regain his footing. Mike yelled, raising the bat once more, its polished surface gleaming ominously under the lantern light. "You think you can take from me?" Fear outweighed ambition now. The robbers stood frozen, the cacophony of their previous bravado shattered like glass. They hadn't prepared for this clash of wills. The realization dawned that they were confronting not just an old farmer, but the spirit of the man who had fought for every inch of this land. As panic seeped through the group, Sarah's resolve wavered. She shouted suddenly, her voice ringing with urgency. Before Mike could respond, the three intruders recoiled, scrambling backward toward the door. They pushed past one another in a chaotic flurry, stumbling over feet in their frantic rush to escape. "Out!" Mike shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos as they fled, bound by fear and desperation. They bolted into the night, shadows blending quickly with the darkness. As the door swung shut behind them, Mike stood still for a moment, heart pounding in his chest. An unexpected wave of adrenaline surged through him, mixing with exhilaration. He felt triumphant, not because he had fought them off, but because he had faced them head-on, unyielding in his resolve. Outside, the cool night air brushed past, tender and calming. The chaos had quieted, replaced by the distant sounds of crickets chirping under the moonlight. Alone in the farmhouse, Mike took a deep breath, allowing the adrenaline to fade. He stepped outside, bat in hand, surveying his domain bathed in silver light. The night was peaceful again, serene in its own way. He glanced toward the horizon, knowing that with the sun would come a new day. The victory tasted sweet, but it was more than just defending material possessions. It was about resilience, the unwavering strength of a man who had poured his life into the land and would face anything that threatened it. The next day dawned bright and warm, sunlight spilling over the fields like liquid gold. Mike felt invigorated, each step across the familiar patch of earth resonating with the heartbeats of his ancestors. He walked through rows of crops, the sight grounding him, but lingering whispers of the previous night swirled through his mind like dust in the wind. News traveled fast in a small town, and soon tales of his bravery began to spread. People began to see him differently, as more than just the rugged farmer who tended his fields. Respect brewed in their voices, respect for a man who didn't flinch in the face of danger. Later that week, as he tended to the livestock, a group of kids from the nearby village approached, wide-eyed and curious. Sam, the oldest of the group, asked, eyes shining with awe. Mike chuckled, leaning on the fence and taking a moment to reflect. Sometimes it's not about the size of the man, but the size of his heart, he replied, a knowing smile creeping onto his face. Lily exclaimed, gasping and giggling. I didn't fight them, kids, Mike corrected gently. I defended my home. The children listened, enraptured by the tale. In their young minds, they were hearing far more than a story of courage. They were absorbing the essence of standing tall against adversity, of knowing your worth. Weeks passed, and the seasons began to shift. The crops grew strong, green, and bountiful, reflecting the spirit of their caretaker. Life continued, marked by hard work and dedication. Yet the encounter with the robbers would leave its mark on Mike forever, reminding him that courage often rises when least expected. One day, as autumn approached, Mike stood at the edge of his fields, basking in the golden hues of the sunset. The serenity wrapped around him, but he felt a pull, a nagging feeling that advised him to remain vigilant. And then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught motion 3 figures creeping along the path leading to his house. His heart raced as he reached for the bat, mind racing back to that fateful night. This time, though, it felt different. It was as if his body had grown to understand the nuances of turmoil. As the figures drew closer, Mike strained to see their faces. They were not the same robbers who had once stormed his home. No, these were different, younger perhaps. And then it clicked. These were the very kids he had told his stories to, seeking the thrill of adventure. They called out, their voices a chorus of joy and mischief. Relief washed over him as laughter erupted from the group. Their innocent faces and youthful exuberance rekindled the warmth in his heart. You kids had me worried for a second, he said, chuckling. The laughter echoed around them as they ran toward him. The tension that had gripped his heart moments before vanished like morning mist in the dawn, replaced with the excitement of camaraderie, adventure, and the unspoken promise of community. And for the old farmer, the lessons learned, the victories won, became more than mere stories. They were threads woven into the fabric of life itself, reminders that sometimes, in the face of darkness, the light only shines brighter when shared with those we cherish. Together, they would embrace a bountiful future, one rooted in courage, teamwork, and a resilient heart that would forge ahead no matter the obstacles. The moon hung low in the night sky, a pale eye watching over the quiet countryside. As darkness enveloped the landscape, 3 figures emerged from the shadows, creeping towards the dimly lit farmhouse. Their footsteps crunched softly, too loud for the fragile stillness of the night. They were robbers fueled by desperation and greed, believing that the sturdy old farmhouse belonged to an easy mark. Inside, Farmer Sam sat at his kitchen table, the warm glow of a single lamp casting comforting light around the room. He was lost in thought, the steady tick of the clock punctuating the silence. He had toiled on this land for over 30 years, nurturing every seed and championing every inch against the stubborn elements. This farmhouse wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was his life's work, a fortress built out of hard-earned sweat, love, and determination. But that resolve was suddenly interrupted by noise coming from outside, footsteps, hushed whispers. Sam's heart quickened as his instincts flared. This wasn't the first time he had sensed trouble, and he had learned to trust his gut. He stood up, sturdy and resolute, feeling the weight of his ancestors on his shoulders. As the whispers grew louder, Sam walked to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to catch a glimpse. There they were, two men and a woman, their faces shrouded in darkness, eyes glinting with ill intentions. The sight sent a bolt of adrenaline coursing through him. They were moments away from violating everything he held dear. His hand brushed against something cool and familiar, the handle of an old baseball bat, a relic that had seen better days but still carried weight. Gripping it tightly, Sam moved to the door, heart pounding, contemplating the years of hard work that had brought him to this moment. He would not allow some petty thieves to steal his peace. Outside, the robbers huddled together, their laughter carrying a sharp edge, mingling with the wind. "This farm looks like it's been long abandoned," Jake, the leader of the group, whispered. Little did they know Sam was ready. He swung the door open, the creak slicing through the night like a gunshot. He demanded, voice steady but booming, a declaration that startled everyone. The robbers, caught off guard, staggered back. Sarah stammered, her bravado deflating as Sam's piercing gaze locked onto hers. He repeated slowly, letting the weight of the word hang in the air. Sam stepped forward, the bat resting on his shoulder, determined and unwavering. "You're trespassing," he asserted, each word carrying the weight of years of toil and sacrifice. Fear twisted in Jake's gut as he quickly assessed the situation. "Come on, let's just—" But Sam wasn't about to allow weakness to emerge. There was a heaviness in the moment, as if time stood still. The robbers exchanged uncertain glances, the hint of panic creeping in like fog. Sam pressed on. "I've worked too hard for this place." Just then, as if the universe decided to test him further, a rustle came from the bushes nearby. A pair of headlights sliced through the darkness as a car pulled onto the gravel driveway. Sam's heart raced. Police, neighbors, whatever it was about to shift the dynamics instantly. Sam bellowed, focusing on the thieves. Panic shot through the group like an electric current. Jake, desperate to regain control, turned to run, but in the chaos, Sarah grabbed his arm. "We can't just leave," Jake shouted, yanking her away. With adrenaline propelling them forward, the trio scrambled off the porch, fear and anger propelling them into the night. But in their haste, they didn't pay attention to the darkness that surrounded them. Sam yelled one last time, gripping the bat tighter. He wasn't letting this end without a showdown. Suddenly, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, creating a chilling harmony with the chaos unfolding. The robbers sprinted towards their getaway car, parked haphazardly by the road, breaths coming in panicked gasps. But what they didn't realize was that Sam had followed them outside, bat in hand, ready to stand firm against any threat. He moved towards the car, the night air charged with tension, determined to confront this chaos head-on. He roared, his voice blunt as a hammer. The thieves froze, their eyes darting toward him, knowing they had a choice to make fight or flee. Jake, clenching his teeth, reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife, metallic glint catching the moonlight. "You think you can scare us off with that old thing?" Fear mingled with defiance. Sam's grip tightened around the bat. In a flash of movement, adrenaline surged through Jake. He lunged forward, but Sam was faster. He swung the bat with all the strength of a man defending his hard work. The hit connected, sending Jake crashing to the ground, the knife tumbling from his grasp. In that moment, Sarah gasped and turned to flee, but Sam's presence loomed large. His voice roared like thunder. Behind him, the sirens grew louder, their echo enveloping the field. Sarah was torn between fear and shock, caught in the haunting echoes of Sam's words. But determined to escape, she grabbed Jake's arm, pulling him towards the car. "Get in, Jake." As they scrambled into the vehicle, panic surged in their movements, hearts pounding with panic. The sound of the sirens was imminent, a reality not lost on them. The headlights of approaching cars painted an unfolding drama, illuminating the chaos. With a screech of tires, they sped away, leaving a cloud of dust and uncertainty behind them. Sam stood at the edge of his property, bat clenched tightly, heart racing. He had faced danger and emerged unscathed, but now he felt the weight of uncertainty settle in the air around him. He could hear the police sirens fading in the distance, and the thrill of victory melded with fear for what might come next, fear that this was only the beginning. As he turned his gaze back toward the farmhouse, a deep sense of unease overcame him. The encounter was far from over. He could feel the impending storm on the horizon, gathering strength and preparing to crash down. The shadow of the robbers loomed in his mind like a dark cloud. He had defended his home tonight, but what if they returned? What if their desperation drove them back? The realization gnawed at him, punctuated by the whispering winds rustling through the fields around him. With the stars twinkling silently above, Sam realized he needed to prepare for whatever came next. He couldn't let fear dictate his actions. He had to outsmart his adversaries. And as the night deepened, a plan began to form, grounded in a fierce determination to protect what was rightfully his. But little did he know, Jake and his crew were regrouping, plotting their revenge under the same moon that bore witness to their initial failure. They were determined to reclaim their pride and prove they were not just petty thieves, but terrible mistakes waiting to be made once more. And in that darkened night, as fatigue settled around him, Farmer Sam stood resolute, ready to face whatever storm lay ahead, knowing it wouldn't just be about defending his land, it would be a battle for his way of life. The tension hung thick in the air, charged and electric, with consequences that were yet to unfold, pushing him deeper into a confrontation that would forever change the course of all their lives.